Other than a number of small groups of pygmies living in the Rwanda, Burundi, Eastern Congo area, a small group of Hadzabe Bushmen living near Lake Eyasi in Tanzania, and 3 scattered groups of Bushmen of the Kalahari living in Namibia and Botswana, and possibly also a small group in Angola, no other near true hunter-gatherers were thought to exist in southern and central Africa by the turn of the last century. Part 1 of this film covered my search to find other remnant groups of true hunter-gatherers that might possibly still be living in Namibia, after having received information that such people are still to be found in the Zebra Mountains of northwestern Namibia. Information to this effect was given to me by Jalepa Jambiro, a member of the Vatwa tribe, in December 2002, whilst I was traveling along the Kunini River, which forms the northern border of Namibia with Angola. According to Jalepa, there were hunter-gatherers of his own tribe still living in the Zebra Mountains, south of Inyandi. They were apparently completely dependent on hunting and the gathering of felt foods for their survival, and also manufactured their own iron hunting weapons by melting ore obtained from the Zebra Mountains. The Zebra Mountains lie just south of the Kunini River and spans an area 75 kilometers long by 40 kilometers wide. The terrain is rugged and most inaccessible, except for the Inyandi Valley, which penetrates the mountain range for a distance of more than 30 kilometers and, according to my topographical maps, would provide access into the mountains. In July 2004, I returned with my wife and 2 friends to Inyandi to go and search for the hunter-gatherers that Jalepa had referred to. On arrival, we found out that Jalepa Jambiro had died since. We found 2 Himba cattle herders who agreed to guide us into the mountains. We walked for 2 days, covering almost the full length of the valley. We came across 1 person only. Possibly previously a hunter-gatherer, he was now herding a small herd of cattle in the valley. Right near the end of the valley, we also came across 3 children playing in the sand. When they saw us, they disappeared into the bush. We found no signs of cattle or goats in the area. We did notice some mahongo patches, indicating that the people who lived there led an agronomical existence. They were therefore not exclusively dependent on hunting and gathering of food. We then went onto the mountain plateau and found a place where there was permanent running water, ample signs of game, and no sign of cattle farming, an ideal area for hunting and gathering, but with no sign of any people living nearby. Despite all our efforts to find the hunter-gatherers that Jalepa Jambiro had referred to, we were not successful. However, we now had a much better idea of the conditions in the mountains. My next trip to the Zebra Mountains was in March of 2005. It had rained well in the area just before I arrived, which meant that the veld was much greener and water was much more readily available. This time, I decided to attempt to access the mountains from the south, and this time with the help of an interpreter. I found a seldom used track which I then followed along the southern perimeter of the mountain range. I wanted to explore the area immediately south of Umbanji, where we had seen the 3 youngsters who had run away from us the previous year. According to my interpreter, the area is known locally as Okohoraure. We met this old man sitting under a tree. He took us to a nearby group of Vatwas who were still partially hunter-gatherers, but whom also owned 1 donkey and planted a small quantity of mahongo. It was clear that the veld around the huts had not been overly grazed, and we also noticed the small mahongo patches, fenced off with dry tree branches. The Zebra Mountains were green, with the zebra stripes clearly visible. The nearby small river was still flowing after the recent rains. In a nearby wild fig, we found some Rupel's parrots, a species endemic to northwestern Namibia. We were taken to the Vatwas to be introduced. Right next to their village, I noticed a mustard tree with some strange objects lying in the shade under the tree. The two items that looked like pots were made of burnt clay. Two iron pipes projected from the underside of the pots. We inquired what the pots were for. The Vatwas indicated that they made their own hunting weapons, and the pots were in fact components of a bellows that they used for the forging of spear and arrow tips. They offered to demonstrate how they went about making their spear and arrow tips. The relative primitiveness, yet skilled manner in which they proceeded, made me decide to film the process and to present it in its entirety here, since these skills are rarely practiced anymore and will almost certainly be completely extinct within the next 10 to 20 years. Firstly, two antelope skins are softened up and carefully tied over the mouths of the bellow pots. A burnt clay spout is inserted in front of the two pipes to prevent them from overheating. As fuel, they use fine charcoal obtained from the soft wood of one of the Commiphora tree species. Only the men manufacture implements. In this case, 2 or 3 persons work together as a team. It was noticeable how relaxed, yet purposefully, they approached their task. They manufacture their own string from the strands of a fertilizer bag, but would otherwise use string made from the bark of a baobab or mopani tree.
Baja. Murmindungu mungu mbingu mulema mujwano walimpa nungwa. No kibere. No, mara jimi ngakit nda kana maja ngana jimi ngakit nda ko kuja kana maja ko baba. Atulia tu. Ni jajo maji haji maji meng. Wakutuna ko mbinga mbondo. Akidenda. Kakina ndo wikit ndaw. Ngugo ko bimakan. Aro. Mado thana ki kuja ata kidongo kuja maji mengu. Komyanga boy.
Two sticks are tied to the center of the skins. Thereafter, the skins are fixed tightly onto the two pots using the string that has just been manufactured. The strips of red cloth tied around the ankles are for the protection against the bites of malarial mosquitoes. Next, some charcoal is carefully placed at the mouth of the spout. One or two burning coals are introduced to the charcoal as they start operating the bellows to fan the fire. In the background, we can hear their only donkey braying. The leaks in the joints between the pots and the pipes are carefully sealed using clay. When the fire reaches a temperature of approximately 900 degrees Celsius, evidenced by its yellow-red glow, a length of scrap iron flat bar is placed in the fire. This particular flat bar was picked up on a scrap heap in Opuo, the capital of Kahokoland, some 80 kilometers away. It is then heated to a temperature of close on 900 degrees Celsius. The tools are stored under some dead leaves in case somebody should pass their workplace when they were not around. One of the members of the group demonstrated the use of a bridle that they have made for their donkey. I asked them whether they ever made their own iron from ore obtained from the mountain, and they replied that this was not the case anymore, since sufficient iron was now obtainable elsewhere. They indicated, however, that many years ago they did in fact still melt their own ore, and could revert to that if the need arose. I mentioned to them that Jalepa Jambira told me in 2002 that apparently there were still people living in the Zebra Mountains who melted their own iron ore with which to make their implements. They confirmed that indeed that was so. There was a small group of Vatwas who had decided to live reclusively in the Zebra Mountains, whose members were true hunter-gatherers. The reason was that they preferred to have their children brought up in the traditional lifestyle and not to be influenced by the Western influences to which they would otherwise be exposed. However, they had found it difficult to survive and had left the mountains sometime between 2002 and 2003. They informed me that they were in fact the only remaining people in the Zebra Mountains who still depended heavily on hunting and gathering. There were no others. Another member of the group produced a piece of paper which had been given to him by one of his children, who attends a mobile school some 10 kilometers from where we were. It listed the arithmetic symbols for plus, minus, multiply, divide, and equal. One could not but sense the moment where the abstract met with the concrete. How would one go about explaining the relevance of the arithmetic symbols to the spear making that they were occupied with? Slowly, the shape of a spear tip begins to take form. These segments of a Commiphora tree trunk are used as a temporary protective handle. Notice the remarkably good condition of the veld in the background. If these people had been cattle and goat farmers, the area would have been stripped of all the vegetation within reach, exposing the denuded soil to the harsh rays of the sun, causing precious moisture entrapped in the soil to rapidly evaporate and the soil to erode eventually. The relatively light impact on the environment of hunting and gathering lifestyles is clearly illustrated here when compared to the devastating impact that pastoral farming has had in the drier parts of Africa. By mid-morning, after 2 hours of continuous work, the shape of the spear tip is now starting to take its final form, but still has to be flattened out. A mount for the spear shaft also has to be formed. While someone from the modern industrial age cannot but be amazed by the relative primitiveness of this process of spear manufacture, he can at the same time not help but notice the relaxed and unhurried atmosphere within which it occurs. Also, the relatively minor impact of the primitive manufacturing process on the natural environment. By the end of the first day, the forging of the spear tip had been completed. The filing down and polishing would be undertaken the following day. Tools were downed and it was time for a smoke break, naturally. Cigarettes are made by rolling a bit of tobacco into a mpani leaf and fixing it with a thorn from a gymnosporum thorn tree. At my request, they fetched the bow and arrow that is used for hunting from one of their huts. It was clear that the basic shape of the arrow tips was identical to that of the spear tip, only smaller. It did not take much encouragement to get them to demonstrate how they go about hunting with a bow and arrow, all of which was presented in a light-hearted manner, accompanied by much laughter. That evening, after we'd prepared our camp and had finished dinner, we were visited by the women and children of the group. Outside it was pitch dark and we had to rig up a spotlight to provide some light. They then proceeded to dance, a traditional dance of the Vatwas, accompanied only by singing and hand clapping. At first, the dancing and clapping was subdued. After about 2 hours of continuous dancing, it became more lively and intense. It was clear that some of the younger members were not used to staying up so late. During the dancing, it was remarkable to see how every member of the group was intensely aware of the movements of the others, and with much joy they shared their dancing experience. As the night wore on, the dancers became mesmerized by the rhythm of their music, almost as if going into a trance. It is difficult to describe the emotions that it arouses, but it is a memory that will not be forgotten quickly. The following day, the filing and polishing phase in the manufacture of the spear tips began. Small scrapers are used to produce a smooth finish to the blades of the spear tip. The scraper blades are first hardened by heating them until red hot, then dipping them into water to increase the hardness of the blade. Great care is taken to give the forged spear tip a perfect shape and finish. With the tip finished, a suitable spear shaft is constructed from a length of tough timber taken from the branch of a wild currant bush. Whilst the iron components of the spear received much attention, not much energy was spent on beautifying or finishing off of the spear shaft itself. Finally, the end piece of the spear is forged and finished off. Much less effort is expended in obtaining a smooth finish for the end piece. The spear is assembled and checked for straightness and balance. In total, it has taken 2 persons 2 full days of work to produce one complete spear. A completed spear can be traded locally for the equivalent of approximately $50. With work finished, it was time for music again. Nomadic people rely on light instruments, if any. The one-string bow instrument that was being played is locally known as an otta. It is pressed against the chest whilst being played, thus resonating in the lungs. By slowly breathing in and blowing out air, an eerie low-frequency sound is obtained, not found with any other traditional African instruments. We had established that, with the exception of this group of Vatwas, there were no other hunter-gatherers remaining in the Zebra Mountains. The last group of true hunter-gatherers of the Zebra Mountains that Jalepa Jambiro had referred to had finally broken up sometime between 2002 and 2003. I decided to extend my search, this time to the remotest part of Namibia, the Baines Mountains.